have not. And I also ask that we use this in a way that be pleasing with thee. We also ask, Lord, that you sit there and bless our lessons today and to help us to understand the meaning of your word. We ask all of these things in your name and our Heavenly Father's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, Book of Ruth. I think we'll fade back into chapter 3 slightly. Maybe we didn't quite finish chapter 3. We might finish the Book of Ruth today. Try to keep in mind that there's an ancient book, so it's ancient times in ancient Israel. So there are some things in it that, if we just do a little review, that are strange to us, customs, thought processes are a little bit different. It's a historical book of the Bible. So the book of Ruth is an account of a small portion of time in the nation of Israel, and concerns this one particular family. And of course, Ruth is the main character, her and her mother-in-law Naomi. So we're going to see some things as this book closes out, a little bit different, a little bit strange to us and our culture, but to them it was normal. They didn't see any. They didn't find it strange. If we look at chapter 3, verse 16, somewhere in there we sort of left off, and Ruth has followed the instructions of her mother-in-law, and she has went to the threshing floor, and she's talked with Boaz, and all this, if you remember, is to attempt to fulfill one of the commandments of the Old Testament. This is for the Old Testament, it's for the Jews, it's not for us. And it had to do with continuing the family line. It had to do with if the husband died and there were no children, no male children particularly, that, I know it's foreign to us, but one of the male members of the family would marry that woman, and the first child would be given back to the dead husband. In name, that is to say. He would carry on his father's name. He'd still live in the household with his actual mother and father, but he would carry the name of his dead father. That's how that would work. Pretty foreign to us. We can't really wrap our minds around that, but that's how that was set up for them at that time. Now, as a side note, a lot of people want to say, "Well, I want to follow the Old Testament law." Well, then you'll have to follow that too. They don't want to do that. The Ten Commandments are fine, but the Ten Commandments are not they're not Christian. Does that surprise you? They are the basis for much law today, and all the other commandments. There are about 613 commandments. Okay, not just 10, but those 10 are the skeleton structure. But they're not Christian. Okay, God's works with the Christian today in a law of love, a law of liberty, a law of the Spirit. Where at that time, this was a law of commandments. You could be put to death for violating some of these commandments. Now, God seemed like God didn't enforce that much. But I don't want to get off on a tangent here. I just want to, get some background, remind everybody that these things are in the Bible, and they're building blocks to get us to the New Testament, to get us to. But if you want to understand some of the New Testament, you have to understand the Old Testament a little bit. You may. I'm not saying you can't get saved if you don't understand it. I'm just saying you read something in the New Testament, and to get a fuller knowledge, you'd like to know what the Old Testament is about. God didn't put it in here for nothing. So obviously that's true. And if that's true, then it's at least worthwhile to look at. Another thing is Ruth is, remember, she's going to end up being part of the lineage of the Lord Jesus. And the grandmother of King David, very prominent in the scriptures. So that's part of all this. It says in verse 16, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, that is Naomi, her mother-in-law, said, who art thou, my daughter? And as I said last time, she wasn't wondering who she was. She was saying, who are you? Like, are you the betrothed of a man? Did Boaz propose? Because first of all, if she didn't know who she was, if that's how this is couched, then Ruth should have said, well, I'm Ruth, your daughter-in-law. But she didn't. It says, and she told her all that the man had done to her. So she said, in other words, I went to see him, just like you said, told him, what we had in mind, that we thought that we ought to fulfill the law of God, and that you're our next of kin. Only Boaz had told her, well, I am, except there's one man, he's slightly more closely related to you than I am, and he has the first right. So this might sound pretty businesslike and sort of contractual. There's no lovey-dovey here. There's no romance. Well, the Bible does, the commandment as it stood did not require that. What it required was you to do what you're supposed to do. Keep that family name alive. Keep that land in the family, in the tribe. Now, that was really important. You could say, I don't see the importance of it now. I got a half an acre. And I will be honest with you, it's a junky half an acre, and I don't really care if my family takes it over when I die or not. There's so much garbage buried out back where they used to do that kind of thing. It's like, that's not very good land. It grows beans. But to them, and the way they were commanded, that land was everything, in a sense. It wasn't more important than the Lord, but it meant so much. And God gave them commandments about that land. And I don't want to get off on this either, but just as I mentioned, that land still matters today. And you'll notice that most of the conflict in this world is centered in that land. And that after the church is gone, there'll still be things going on in that land. And they won't be nice. Okay? So, anyway, here we are. This is really actually, this is the backbone of the Old Testament, but this is a pretty important line of thought in the Old Testament. This keeping of the land and providing for the continuation of the tribes of Israel. So, verse 17, and she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. And that she just kind of rehearsing the story. She told her everything that transpired, which we're not going to go back and review, but you can go back and review that if you need to in chapter 3. But she gave her the whole story, what happened that night down at the threshing floor. So here's Naomi's reaction. Then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. So here's what she said to her. She heard what Ruth says, and she says, now first of all, she knows what kind of man Boaz is. Second of all, she heard his reaction, and he had told her, I'm going to take care of this, and I'm going to take care of it the right way. I'm not going to presume. I'm going to go to the nearest of kin and give him his first opportunity. Ruth, you may end up marrying him instead of me. And Naomi didn't balk at that. She said, well, you got to wait until you see how it's going to fall out. So I don't know who's your husband's going to be, but you're going to have one. Now again, we want to get lovey-dovey and romantic, and where's the prince on a shining, armor on a white horse? They weren't looking at it that way. I told you before, my paternal grandmother, when she got married, she said, I didn't love him. I needed him. And so they got married. That was a long time before I came along. So, in the Depression, you did, that people thought different. And you could still think that way today. It's not a requirement for there to be butterflies and rainbows to get married. The requirement is you get married, you come together physically. It's pretty simple. Now you can learn to love one another. And I think that is sort of read into this, that they will learn to love one another. But right now it's just, how's this going to be fixed? Because we've got 2 widows here, one of them marriageable, and nothing's been done about it. And at that time in Israel, it needed to be taken care of. And there were eligible men to do it. Then went, chapter 4, verse 1, then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there. Now, if you take your handy-dandy Bible program on your phone, this supercomputer in your pocket, and you look up about the gate, the city gates, look those words up. You're going to find this all throughout, particularly the Old Testament. And what you're going to see is the gates of the city are pretty important in that culture. This is like the courthouse, the county seat, the place of business. Transactions were done at the gate in front of witnesses. There was no notary publics. There's no cameras to record what took place. I'm sure if you got married, that's how it was done. Simply with witnesses. There's no state licensing branch or whatever. It was the mother and father, family members stood around, and 3 years later, if you said, well, I don't want her no more. In fact, we never did get married. They'd say, wait a minute, I was there. So at that gate of the city, that's where things took place. That's where Boaz went. So this little town, Bethlehem, very, very famous town in the Bible, isn't it? He went up to the gate and sat him down there. So he sits there and he's waiting. What is he waiting for? He's waiting for people to come along that day, doing their business, and begin to gather them together. And these men would have understood, oh, he wants me to come over here by the gate and sit down. He's going to transact some business. It's my duty as a fellow Bethlehemite to sit down here and to be a witness. That's what we do for each other. That's how we conduct ourselves. So it was understood. He didn't have to explain to them what was about to transpire. They didn't maybe know what the business was, but they would have understood that Boaz wants to conduct some business. So Boaz is the man there's been a proposal of marriage, but he said, I can't do that. Not until we talk to, Bill over here, because Bill's closely related. Maybe Boaz is a second cousin and Bill's the first cousin. Whatever the case may be, he gets his chance first, and he's going to do this at the city gate in front of witnesses so that it's binding and it can't be backed out of. And he sat down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. So he greets him, and it's a friendly greeting, but when he says, here, sit down here at the gate, he thinks, well, we've got some business to do. I don't know what it is, but I'm a businessman. That's what we do. It's what we do in this town, especially the men who are not just the workers in the field, the owners of land who had some pull, you might say. They all would know each other and be aware that that's what's going to happen. So he sits down. Verse 2, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye down here. And they sat down. So again, there's no discussion that we see. I'm not saying they didn't discuss, but what I'm saying is nothing that the Bible thought, God didn't think it necessary to write all that down. Everybody understood. It'd be like saying, John, you John Harlan, and Caleb, y'all come up here. I got to talk to you guys. You guys would know, oh, okay, this is kind of a men's meeting we're going to have here. We got some things we got to talk about that must be some importance. You would not think that I'm asking you to come up here so I can tell you a joke, right? And they knew that. So that they knew this wasn't sit down, let's sit down and chew the fat. They knew that's not what was going to happen. We're going to do some business. So he says, and he said, verse 3, and he said unto the kinsman. So these are all listening. They're not part of it. But he says, Boaz says to his cousin, or whatever he was, his kinsman, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. Now, we've read this book together, and so we all know that everybody knows in the small town of Bethlehem who Naomi is, that she had left, now she's back, she's a widow, she brought with her Ruth, the daughter-in-law. He's only mentioning this to be specific. But everybody knew that, and so he says, but the thing of it is, she's ready to transact business on the property. She's going to sell the land, and that's kind of the initial. It was Elimelech, the dead husband of Naomi, and the two boys are dead. Everybody knows that, so it's a bad situation. But here she is. She's going to sell the land. That sounds straightforward. And he says in verse 4, and I thought to advertise thee. So he says, I found this out, and so I thought, well, I better let you know. Saying, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. In other words, let's do this right. Let's come together, get the elders, the people. There's going to be witnesses. There's going to be people walking by the gate who aren't sitting there and see this. And they're going to like stroll over and say, what's going on? And they're going to stand there too. So even the inhabitants of the land, the non-elders, are going to just like stroll by, and they're going to stand there and look, listen to all this. You're going to have more than just 10 witnesses. You're going to have all kinds of people. Men, women, children, everybody's going to gather around. What's going on here? There was no TV to go home and watch. So this would be kind of like entertainment. You're all going to stop and say, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Well, I'll stand here and listen a minute. We'll find out. And he says, I thought to advertise thee. Buy it before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. Now this redeeming meant to say, well, if you're old like me, you know what it means, because you used to redeem pop bottles. You take pop bottles to the store, and if they were nickel or 10 centers or whatever they were, usually nickel, and you'd turn them in, Vonda, and then they'd give you back. And it was recycling before they called it recycling, right? So this redeeming was sort of like they were buying it back. And this whole book is about the kinsman redeemer, the near of kin, the kinsman, the closest relation male, redeeming the land and the inheritance back to the rightful owners, so that it didn't just go and peter out and the land belongs to nobody and goes to maybe to a different tribe or a different family. That wasn't what God wanted. Spiritually, this points to Christ. He's the kinsman redeemer, if you will. He redeems the people back to himself. God's not, God's not needing us. He's wanting us. He's a family man, and he wants friends. Why build a big city up there and just have it be empty? He said, well, I'll be there, okay, but he wants more. So he's went out of his way, and notice that in this kinsman redeemer idea, it would never be a good situation. See, because there has to be a death of the husband in order to even need this. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if the kinsman doesn't do the redeeming, the inheritance falls away and goes to another family, and that man's forgotten. It's over. So we kind of that's our culture today. If you're the last surviving male member, that's it. Well, God had a way, and this is what he wanted. This is what he told them. It's Old Testament. It's not for us. But it leads to this. It points to Christ. If Christ doesn't step in, there's no hope for you and me. We're forgotten about. I got nothing to offer. In the kinsman redeemer idea, it's really, you're going to see here, this guy, when he hears this, he's going to view this as, oh, there's more to it? What's the other part? Well, let's look at it. So he says, if you will redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. So he makes him the deal, says, if you want to buy the land, go ahead. If not, I want to know that, because then I'm going to do it. So what do you say? Oh yeah, I'll buy the land. Okay. Then said Boaz, verse 5, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Okay, you buy the land, but she comes with the deal. And you marry her, as the law says, and your firstborn son is Elimelech. He's going to be an Elimelech son. He's your blood son, yeah, but he's going to inherit all that. That's where his inheritance will come from, and that's the name he's going to carry. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself. Lest I mar mine own inheritance. It'll mar my inheritance. There's nothing in the kinsman redeemer law about that. Just totally my opinion. In my opinion, he's reneged because he don't want her. She's Moabite. She's not Jew. He's not looking at her virtuous qualities. He don't want her. She's not quality, whatever. Maybe he's got a wife, and he doesn't want to. And again, that's foreign to us. But in the Old Testament culture, it was possible. Wasn't encouraged. Wasn't never ordained, but it was possible. He's ready to buy it, then he's not ready to buy it. And the only thing that changed his mind was you got to take Ruth. So he said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to marry her, and it'll mar my inheritance. It wouldn't have marred his inheritance one bit, because marrying her, that land and all that won't affect you. It goes with her son that she bears to you. Your inheritance will still be yours. But he said, no, it'll mess mine up. It'll mar means to scar or to harm. If I were to mar this piece of wood, I'd take a hammer and hit it really hard and make a big mark in it. I've marred that piece of wood. Or if you mar someone's name, you say, well, they're this and they're that, and they're a fool and they're an idiot. You have marred their reputation. You've marred their name. So he said, it'll mar my inheritance. Well, I can't see that. That's just my opinion. But I can't see that's the case. But that's what he said. And you will find that if you investigate this a little bit, that I have a basis for saying what I just said. But I'm not trying to show off or anything, but I'm just saying it. We'll get to that. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. Well, he could. I'm getting into semantics here. He just said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. He could, but he wouldn't. Now, this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing, meaning like changing hands, land or property changes hands, for to confirm all things. Now, this is weird to us. A man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Now, you're just wearing a sandal or something, and even if it was a full-blown shoe like we have today, it's not that big of a deal. It just seems a little odd. Can we shake hands on the deal, or can't we sign papers? Well, they took off their shoe. However, what you'll read here, when this was first given in the actual first 5 books of the Bible, she got to spit on him. So you would go get Ruth and say, there you go, and she'd walk up and spit on him. So the taking off of the shoe was a was sort of a modified version. What they're saying with this is, you take off the shoe. What does that mean? Why would you do that? Well, your shoes are on your feet, and your feet trod the land. And this. I got to go back to this. This land is not like America. America's not in the Bible. Israel is. Okay? Somebody says, well, where's America fit into the book of Revelation? It doesn't. It's not that important. Israel does. And that land. And I know there's some mention of other surrounding lands, but we don't figure into that. We think we're big shots now, but we don't fit into that. I'm not saying there's absolutely, positively no place where we could possibly be seen on there in those prophetic books, but this land was very important. And so in this taking off of the shoe, you're saying you're giving up your right to tread the land. You can't walk on this land. And when she would walk up and spit on you, that's to say, you didn't do what Moses commanded to do, because you wouldn't have me. Now here they didn't have her do that. And you're in the book of you're in the time of the Judges here. And so Israel's sort of adrift. They're not strictly following everything that God commanded them to do. Don't go home and say, we're supposed to do all this stuff. No, you're not. But this is this is history, and it's in the Bible, and it helps us to understand some of the things we read here. This was a testimony in Israel. That last phrase of verse 7. This was seen as, did you hear? What? Boaz's cousin plucked off his shoe. He wouldn't do it. Oh. So there was a transaction about that land, huh? They would know right away. When you say plucked off his shoe, it's, in other words, he refused the right. You have to explain the whole thing. They would have understood it. You're talking about less than, maybe Kingsbury, about the size of Kingsbury or something like that. Not talking about a big village. Everybody knew everybody. You walked everywhere. You passed each other every day. That's just, everybody would have known. Verse 8, therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. Said, you buy it. Buy it for yourself. So we're going to leave all that behind now and go into verse 9 and change of subject a little bit. This guy's out of the picture now. Deal's done. And all he's got to do now is declare what he's going to do. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, so there's all these other people listening, watching, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. So remember, Chilion and Mahlon are the sons of Elimelech, and one married Orpah, who went back home to Moab. The other married Ruth, and Ruth wouldn't leave. She said, I'll go where you go. I'll die where you die. Your God will be my God. And only death will part me from your side. And you're going to see that these people they've not just heard Ruth's words or the legend of them, they've watched Ruth's life. And so, moreover, verse 10, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife. We find that maybe repugnant to say purchased a wife. Well, they didn't find it that way at all. So just know that, okay? Even if we say, if somebody come and said, Matt, I want to purchase your daughter to be my wife, I would just say, get out of my house. But here, this wasn't understood like that. And so they were proud of it. Purchase to be my wife. To what? To raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of this place. Ye are witnesses this day. He didn't say, I'm doing all this because I just think Ruth is my loving sweetheart. Maybe he did, but that wasn't the point. He didn't say, I'm doing this because I'll double the size of my property. No, because he didn't consider it his. He said, I'm going to redeem it, but it's going to be that boy's. What boy? Well, the one that we're theoretically going to have. Now, I know that's strange thinking, but think about the implications there. And the strict adherence, he's trying to strictly adhere to what God had already commanded these people to do. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. Now that would have been enough, but notice the rest of their reaction. How do they view this transaction, and how do they view what Boaz has just taken upon himself to do? And then look back at the guy that plucked off his shoe and just tell me why they spit on him. They used to spit on him when they did that. We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. They're thrilled. And they're heaping praise. And they're saying, may God bless you. And we hope you have a whole bunch of kids. And they reached all the way back to their famous ancestor Judah and said, may you be like he was. And then they reached even further back to Jacob and said, we want this new little Moabitess girl to be like Rachel and Leah, because they were the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel, the whole nation and everything. I mean, this was pretty flowery language. I mean, they were really saying, you're a great man because you do what God said. Now, again, I want to emphasize, God never said this to the church. He never said this to you and I, Gentile-ish people, but he did to them. I don't even know if they practice it today. I doubt it, but they did then, and that was kind of the point, or one of the points. So I would love to go back and look at the history of this Rachel and Leah and Pharez and Tamar and all that. And that's not a pretty story either, but it is what it is. 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. Now, scientifically, this is an adult Bible class. Scientifically, if a man and woman come together in marriage, there's liable to be kids be born. But as I read over this and saw that, I said, now wait a minute. The Bible does say the Lord gave her conception. So that we may still say today, when a child is born, we had 5, the Lord gave conception. Now, does that apply for everybody? Seems to. And I don't know about, I told you at the start of this, I don't know about all this. Naomi's like, the Lord's being harsh with me and he's dealt bitterly with me. And I told you, I don't want us as Christians to talk like that. But I can understand it, but I just don't think that's the way to view things. That everything good thing that happened is God's blessing and every bad thing that happened is God's curse. I don't believe that. I don't believe the Bible teaches that. But that's how we feel sometimes. Now listen to how the women take this. And the women, so this is like the men talk to the men and the women talk to the women. It was a separated culture in that regard. And the women said unto Naomi, now remember, let's take, we only got about 5 minutes. Let's jump back. Chapter 1, really quick. Verse 19. She's coming home, remember? So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them. And they said, is this Naomi? She's been gone a long time. And she said unto them, call me not Naomi. Call me Mara. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. Change my name. Naomi's too good a name. I went out full, and the Lord brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? That's how she felt about it. Here they said, now let's go back to chapter 4. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. I'm just going to read all this. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There's a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. Ram begat Aminadab. Aminadab begat Nahshon. Nahshon begat Salmon. Salmon begat Boaz. Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David, the king. So you see their reaction. They said, whoo, this is, God is shining down you now. Remember, I'm Mara. I'm bitter. Don't call me Naomi. Their names sort of kind of went for more than just a name. It had a meaning. It'd be like having a boy and calling him Block, If he was a husky made boy, it was always, that's just his name, Block. It fit him. I particularly have a hard time with calling somebody, I won't use any names because I don't want to make anybody mad, but sometimes people will choose names and you think, I don't know if I would name a child that. That's got a bad connotation to it, It carries, I can't think of anything. I guess like calling a kid Hitler. Why would you do that? It's a terrible thing to name a child. So I think we're going to change gears next time, if the Lord's will, and go somewhere else. I would like to go over this some more, but we ran out of time today, and we are sort of at the end of the book. So we're going to have Harlan dismiss in prayer, and hopefully next time, Lord willing, we'll move on to something else.